In the beginning, there is silence. The kind of silence that hums louder than sound itself. The kind that presses against your chest when you stare into a void too deep for your eyes to hold. And it is in this silence that black holes whisper their first secret, not as graves but as something older, stranger, more enduring than death. Because what we have always been told is that they are endings, cosmic devourers, monsters that eat light and time. But what if those whispers are not screams of destruction but songs of passage, invitations into unseen realms, gateways where galaxies collapse and rebirth waits on the other side? And you can feel it when you imagine that spiral, when you close your eyes and picture the stars vanishing into a mouth of nothingness. You do not sense only terror. You sense an open door, a corridor pulling you forward, like standing before a temple that has outlived every civilization that tried to describe it. And though scientists will speak of singularities and event horizons, though textbooks will insist this is where physics breaks, you cannot shake the ancient resonance, the echo that civilizations before us felt when they carved spirals into stone, when they painted suns devoured by serpents, when they aligned temples to the black patches of sky. They too heard the whisper of the abyss, and wondered if it spoke of endings or beginnings. And so the story begins, not with a final scream but with a question, one that pierces deeper than equations, one that lingers at the edge of your thoughts when you dare to ask, what if the black hole is not a tomb but a tunnel, not a silence but a secret, not a monster but a messenger from realms we cannot yet see? And as you lean closer into this whisper, the hum grows louder, like the vibration of a cosmic drum, reminding you that reality itself may not be as sealed as you were told, that the abyss does not end with death, but opens to mysteries untouched by human eyes. And so we step closer, candle in hand, into the hall of shadows where myths and science begin to intertwine, where you and I are no longer bystanders but witnesses, standing before the greatest riddle of the universe, listening, waiting, drawn deeper into the whisper of the abyss. Long before telescopes pierced the heavens, before physicists measured spacetime or named the singularity, there were the ancient eyes of humanity gazing upward, night after night, mapping the dark spaces between stars. And in those spaces they found not emptiness but meaning. For to the Mayans the swirling spiral was not merely art but prophecy, etched into temples as if to warn that the universe itself breathes through cycles of creation and destruction. To the Egyptians the sky was a river crossed by Ra each night, swallowed by a great serpent and born anew at dawn, a myth that uncannily mirrors the way black holes devour suns, yet may give birth to new realms beyond. And to the Mesopotamians who first charted the constellations on clay, the dark voids were doorways through which gods and demons moved freely, shaping the fates of kings. And so from the deserts of Giza to the jungles of Central America, humanity carried a strange awareness that the darkest regions of the cosmos were not simply voids but thresholds, carved into stone, painted on walls, whispered into ritual chants. And when you stand today among the ruins of Chichen Itza and trace your hand across the spiral glyphs, when you tilt your head beneath the broken columns of Karnak and see how shafts of light once aligned with hidden constellations, you feel the same tremor they must have felt, the pull of a mystery beyond words. For how could civilizations separated by oceans and centuries speak the same symbolic language, serpents devouring suns, spirals swallowing stars, unless they were responding to a truth written into the fabric of the night itself, a truth that scientists now chase with equations and particle accelerators, but which the ancients honored with fire and prayer? And perhaps in their myths lies not ignorance but encoded knowledge, fragments of a story we are only now relearning, that the abyss has never been silent, that the black patches of the sky have always whispered, and the ancients, with no telescopes, no satellites, only eyes and memory, saw enough to know that these voids were not final graves, but cosmic gates, doors through which even gods must pass. And as we step forward in this story, we must honor their vision, for their eyes to the sky were the first mirrors of the abyss, and their myths remain the oldest roadmaps to the mystery of black holes as gateways, not graves. Imagine the crackle of papyrus, the scent of oil lamps burning in long stone corridors, shelves groaning with scrolls that contained the sum of human knowledge in the ancient world. And among them, whispered legends say, were manuscripts that spoke of the stars not as distant lanterns but as living forces, and in these texts the voids between constellations were described as mouths of eternity, dark funnels where time itself folded inward. And if the legends are true, then hidden inside the Library of Alexandria was knowledge far ahead of its time, knowledge that linked the myths of black suns to the possibility of gateways through the universe. And though official history tells us the library burned, many scholars and conspiracy theorists insist that the most dangerous scrolls did not vanish in flames but were quietly taken, hidden away by priests or kings who feared the public would misinterpret them, or perhaps by secret orders who understood that if mankind discovered that the heavens contained not endings but doors, the structure of religion, empire, and authority would collapse, and so these scrolls became ghost stories, fragments of rumor spoken in the marketplaces of Rome and whispered in the halls of medieval monasteries, tales of ancient astronomers who knew that the stars could die into blackness but rise again into light on the other side. And when you picture that vast library, with its marble floors and towering columns, you can almost see a hooded figure pulling a scroll from the shelf, tracing words written in Greek and Egyptian, words that describe a dark sphere devouring a sun, and instead of despair, the text speaks of passage, of the second dawn, of a gate beyond the grave. And this is why the loss of the library still haunts us, because it is not only a tragedy of burned knowledge, but the silencing of secrets we were perhaps never meant to know. And today, as scientists debate whether black holes spawn new universes, whether they are tunnels instead of tombs, we are reminded that 2,000 years ago someone may have already asked the same questions, written the same visions, and perhaps even answered them, but the answers lie in ash, in the ruins of Alexandria, where smoke swallowed the whispers of eternity, leaving us to wonder, what if the greatest key to understanding black holes was already written, already known, and already hidden, waiting in a scroll that never burned but sleeps in secrecy, holding truths about gateways in the abyss that could change how humanity sees the cosmos forever? Stand with me at the edge of a star collapsing. Feel the trembling silence as gravity gathers its final hymn. And there it is, the line no light can cross, the event horizon, described in equations as boundary, but in truth experienced as threshold, the last visible frontier before matter, energy, and time itself bow to the abyss. And while physics tells us it is a prison wall, an invisible surface where escape becomes impossible, listen closer, for thresholds are not only barriers, they are passages. Every temple doorway, every city gate, every myth of death and rebirth places meaning at the crossing. And the event horizon is the universe's most absolute crossing, a place where photons are stretched like whispers. Time slows to a crawl, and the observer sees eternity unfold in a single frozen instant. Yet inside, the traveler feels only the plunge, seamless, unstoppable, as though reality itself were urging a step through. And think of it this way: when you approach a door, you do not fear the wood, you wonder what lies behind it. And so too with black holes. Perhaps the event horizon is less a wall than a veil, a cosmic curtain, concealing transition into a realm uncharted. And modern science, with its paradoxes, confirms the riddle. Because information cannot be destroyed, yet black holes consume everything. So where does it go? Does it linger on the horizon like echoes trapped in glass? Or does it pass through to another domain, carrying the memory of stars into a fresh genesis? And as telescopes sharpen their gaze, capturing silhouettes of monstrous voids against galaxies, we see not only shadows but outlines of doors, and the metaphor grows irresistible. The event horizon as a sacred threshold, marked not with stone arch or carved spiral, but with warping spacetime. And it reminds us that human life, too, is measured by thresholds. The first breath, the last, each a horizon crossed, feared yet inevitable. And in this mirror we glimpse something profoundly human, that perhaps the cosmos itself practices passage, not annihilation. And as the abyss pulls us closer, we realize that what we call end may be the beginning of another continuum, and the whisper of the horizon is not warning but invitation. Dare to see not a wall but a way through, for the threshold of the black hole may be the greatest door in existence, the seam between universes, the dark river's edge where everything we know gives way to everything we cannot yet imagine. And standing there, one thought burns clear. The horizon is not the end of the story. It is the place the story begins anew. Picture a quiet room in 1915. Chalk dust settling in the air. A tired man pacing the wooden floorboards with wild hair, deep eyes, and a mind that refused to obey limits. And on his blackboard curved lines and tangled symbols begin to form what would later be called the field equations of general relativity. Equations that told humanity gravity is not a force pulling downward, but the bending of space-time itself, and in their elegance lay a danger. For hidden inside those formulas was the seed of something darker than any myth. The mathematical possibility of collapse so complete that space and time folded into a single point, and Einstein himself hesitated, unsettled by the monster his theory implied. But the equations did not lie. They whispered of singularities, of stars heavy enough to bend reality into knots, of horizons that no light could cross. And in those chalk lines the foundations of the black hole were born. Yet even more disturbing was what other mathematicians began to extract from his work: tunnels and bridges through space-time, wormholes predicted not by imagination but by pure math. And these bridges, unlike walls, suggested passage, suggested that the universe was not closed but threaded with unseen corridors. And though Einstein dismissed some of these solutions as unphysical, others seized upon them, daring to ask if the math was a map, if black holes were not cosmic tombs but doorways encoded in the very structure of reality. And here lies the danger, for every empire depends on boundaries, every worldview depends on limits. And Einstein's equations dared to say limits may be illusions, that space-time is pliable, that endings can become beginnings if you walk far enough along the curve. And as you lean over those equations, following the chalk spirals and tensors, you see how they resemble the spirals carved into Mayan stone, how they echo the thresholds drawn in Alexandria's scrolls. And the thought chills you, that ancient whispers and modern math converge on the same abyss, a place where falling does not mean dying, but crossing. And so, the dangerous beauty of Einstein's equations lies not only in describing the cosmos as it is, but in hinting at what it might become. A multiverse stitched together by hidden doors, a reality that does not end but endlessly transforms. And perhaps Einstein knew this. Perhaps that is why he looked uneasy when asked about black holes. Perhaps that is why his notebook sometimes trembled with equations left unfinished, because he feared the truth more than he feared error. And today, as physicists use those same equations to model wormholes and cosmic gateways, we are reminded that the greatest dangers are not weapons or wars, but ideas that refuse to stay caged, equations that whisper the universe is larger, stranger, and more alive than we ever dared to believe. It is one thing to speak of black holes as theory, as chalk marks and whispered possibilities on Einstein's blackboard, but it is another to point a telescope toward the heavens and see evidence with your own eyes. And that is what happened in the 20th century, when astronomers first detected Cygnus X1, a star system where something invisible, yet monstrously heavy, was devouring its companion, pulling matter into a whirl of X-ray fire, a silent predator revealed not by light, but by the absence of it. And those who observed it became the first witnesses, the ones who confirmed black holes were not nightmares in equations but living realities. And soon after, at the center of our own Milky Way, they found Sagittarius A, a hidden giant whose gravity whirled entire stars like pebbles in a sling. And suddenly the abyss was no longer distant myth or speculation. It was home, lodged in the heart of our galaxy. And those first observers, peering through radio dishes and orbiting satellites, felt the chill of recognition, because what they saw matched what ancient myths had already whispered: serpents swallowing suns, spirals in the sky, thresholds hidden in darkness. And in their discovery, humanity crossed a threshold of its own. For once you know black holes exist, you cannot unknow them. You cannot return to a universe of stable stars and predictable heavens, and their silence is more terrifying than their violence, because they do not shout, they do not roar, They simply wait, pulling everything into a center that cannot be seen. And yet behind that silence burns a deeper question. What if they are not only consuming but concealing? What if the light swallowed by Sagittarius A is not gone but carried, delivered, reborn beyond the veil? And this is where the mystery deepens. Because as the first observers recorded their data, graphed their orbits, measured their radiation, they became the new scribes of the abyss, writing down in scientific language what ancients inscribed in stone, that the darkest places are not empty, but alive with passage. And though the scientific community framed these discoveries in cautious terms, speaking of stellar collapse and accretion disks, the awe of those first observers could not be disguised. You can hear it in their interviews, see it in their papers, the recognition that we stand in a universe where monsters are real, but perhaps so are gateways. And the confirmation of black holes as fact was not the end of the story but its beginning, because to observe the abyss is to invite the question of what lies beyond. And in their silence, black holes demand not only our fear but our imagination. And so the first observers became the first witnesses, not only of destruction, but of possibility. Subscribe now to uncover cosmic mysteries, black hole secrets, multiverse theories, and ancient myths that reveal whether black holes are gateways to other universes or hidden passages through time. Behind the Iron Curtain, in the cold corridors of Soviet laboratories, where secrecy was oxygen and ambition was measured in classified files, rumors began to circulate of an experiment that dared to test the very limits of A.G. Einstein's dangerous equations. A project whispered to involve miniature black holes, artificial gateways crafted in the name of science but hidden under the shroud of military interest. And though the official archives remain silent, fragments of testimony from defectors and shadowed reports suggest that in the late 1960s and early 1970s, physicists working in remote research centers near Novosibirsk and Baikonur were tasked with probing gravitational collapse at the particle level, using accelerators far less powerful than CERN but guided by a hunger to outpace the West. And some accounts claim these scientists spoke openly in closed circles about the possibility of microsingularities, temporary distortions in spacetime that flickered in and out of existence. And the conspiracy deepens when you follow the trail of names erased from academic publications, promising young physicists who vanished from conference rosters, leaving behind no explanations, as though they had stepped not only out of history but perhaps into the abyss they studied. And while skeptics dismiss these tales as Cold War paranoia, others point to strange seismic readings in remote Soviet territories, unexplained energy spikes recorded in declassified American satellite data, brief flashes of radiation that resemble nothing known in conventional physics. And here the line between fact and myth dissolves, because the Soviets excelled at hiding failure. Yet even in failure truth leaks. And what if the truth is that for a moment, for a fraction of a second, a Soviet experiment pierced the veil, conjuring a black hole too small to endure yet large enough to whisper of what lay beyond? And if such an event occurred, it would explain the silence, the vanished scientists, the missing data. For what empire would reveal to the world that its scientists had touched the forbidden threshold of spacetime, that they had stared into a gate and perhaps lost themselves in it? And so the legend survives, retold in hushed voices by researchers who insist the Soviets knew more than they admitted, that they may have glimpsed the possibility that black holes are not graves but gateways. And whether truth or myth, the story itself is a mirror of human obsession, the refusal to accept boundaries, the longing to turn theory into doorway, and the haunting possibility that somewhere in the archives of Moscow still lies a sealed folder stamped with red ink, containing the equations, the diagrams, and perhaps the final log of a man who saw too much, who stood before a man-made abyss and listened to its whisper before vanishing into silence. Across continents and centuries, carved into stone, woven into myth, painted on temple walls, and whispered through ritual chants, the serpent appears, vast and eternal, coiling through the sky as devourer and reborn redeemer. And in its endless hunger lies a truth that echoes the behavior of black holes, because in Norse myth Jormungandr, the world serpent, circles the earth and swallows its own tail, a cosmic Ouroboros mirroring the cycle of destruction and renewal, while in Hindu tradition, Ananta Shesha lies beneath Vishnu, endless coils supporting the universe I, self, and in Mayan stories, the great feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl carries the sun into darkness only to return it reborn, and in Egypt, Apophis wages war each night against Ra's solar bark, swallowing the sun in darkness before dawn's resurrection. And what unites these serpent myths is not mere animal symbolism but a profound resonance, the sense that ancient cultures saw in the heavens patterns of cosmic swallowing, cycles of light vanishing and reappearing, thresholds between death and rebirth. And when you look at images of a black hole devouring a star, light spiraling into a hungry mouth of gravity, it feels as if those myths were not fantasy but allegory, an ancient attempt to articulate the abyss that modern physics now describes in equations. And perhaps these cultures sense something beyond the visible, felt in their bones the presence of cosmic passages where light and life disappear but do not end. And when you trace the serpent's body across the myths, you find it is never only a destroyer, it is also a bridge, a connector between realms, its coils binding heaven and earth, its mouth devouring but also opening, and so the serpent becomes the earliest symbol of the black hole as gateway, feared yet revered, a cosmic guardian of thresholds. And even now, in modern science, the Ouroboros is invoked as metaphor for closed time loops and cyclical universes, suggesting the ancients were not only telling stories, but encoding truths. And when you stand at Chichen Itza during the equinox, watching the shadow of the serpent descend the pyramid steps, you realize this was a calendar not only of harvests, but of the eternal cycle, a reminder that endings are beginnings, that swallowed suns rise again. And perhaps what they worshipped was not a snake at all, but the black holes, whose hunger wrote themselves across their skies. And though we call it myth, though we label it metaphor, the serpent's whisper is the same as the abyss, that nothing ends, everything transforms, and the cosmic serpent coils still around our imagination, urging us to see the devourer not as death but as door, not as grave but as gateway. Step closer now, into the paradox where physics itself fractures. For if general relativity paints black holes as smooth, inevitable prisons, quantum theory refuses to bow, declaring that information can never be destroyed, not even by the abyss. And here begins the great cosmic puzzle, because when matter, light, and memory fall into a black hole, relativity says they vanish beyond the event horizon. Yet quantum mechanics insists they must persist, hidden, encoded, transformed. And this contradiction has haunted the brightest minds for decades. From Stephen Hawking's early proclamation that black holes obliterate information, to his later reluctant revision that perhaps they leak it back through subtle radiation, the faint hiss of energy escaping the void. And in that hiss may lie the truth. For if information is preserved, then black holes are not graves but vaults, strange keepers of memory that must eventually release their secrets. And when you think of it that way, the abyss is not an ending but a hidden archive, a cosmic passage that swallows only to safeguard, and perhaps even to transfer. And this is why the quantum puzzle is more than mathematics. It is the heartbeat of the mystery. Because if information flows through the black hole and emerges elsewhere, then the elsewhere must exist. A realm beyond the horizon where data is carried, reborn, or reassembled. And physicists speak of firewalls, holographic principles, and entanglements stretched across horizons. Yet beneath the jargon hums a simple whisper: nothing truly dies. Everything moves, everything crosses. And in this whisper we hear echoes of the ancients who spoke of serpents devouring suns only to return them at dawn. And in this puzzle lies humanity's reflection, because we too fear oblivion, yet long to believe memory, love, and story are not destroyed but carried somewhere, somehow. And so black holes become not cosmic monsters but mirrors of our deepest hope, that the end is never the end, that information, whether of atoms or souls, finds its passage. And though the puzzle remains unsolved, each equation, each experiment, each paradox is a candle in the darkness, guiding us toward the truth that black holes are not only devourers but bridges, keepers, and perhaps even creators of continuity. And as you listen to the silence of the abyss, Imagine it not as erasure, but as encryption, not as loss, but as translation. The quantum puzzle reminding us that the cosmos may be stranger, more generous, and more eternal than fear allows, and that behind every paradox is not contradiction but doorway. Imagine space as silent, an eternal vacuum where no air exists to carry a note. Yet in 2003 astronomers pointed the Chandra X-ray Observatory toward the Perseus galaxy cluster and discovered something that shattered this belief. The first recorded sound waves from a black hole, vibrations etched across 250 million light-years of gas, humming in a pitch so low it resonated once every 10 million years, far beneath human hearing, yet undeniably real. And when scientists translated the frequency into audible form, the universe sang, a cosmic drone rising out of darkness. Proof that black holes do not merely swallow but resonate, broadcasting echoes that ripple through space-time itself. And this sound was not noise, it was structure. Waves, sculpting matter and guiding galaxies. And if you close your eyes as you listen to NASA's recording, it feels like a chant, a temple hum, the kind of vibration monks have pursued for centuries, searching for tones that connect human souls to the infinite. And here we find another layer to the mystery. For if black holes are gateways, then the hum may be the key, the vibration of the door itself. A frequency that says transition is happening. And though science calls them pressure waves, in mythic language they are songs of the abyss, voices of the devourer whispering across eternity. And perhaps that is why ancient rituals used drums, horns, and chanting to mirror the cosmic hum, to attune human bodies to the same resonance, to align life with the pulse of the universe. And when you imagine those monks, shamans, and priests, their chants spiraling upward in candlelit halls, it is not hard to see how they too might have been listening to the same sound, faintly felt in their bones, a vibration of thresholds. And so the black hole becomes not a monster but a singer, the abyss not silence but song, and that realization transforms the way we imagine death itself. For if darkness hums, then endings are not mute. They carry melody, continuity, rhythm, and the very fact that we can record the voice of a black hole proves that what falls into the abyss does not vanish quietly. It resonates forever, woven into the structure of galaxies, and perhaps into the fabric of other universes. And as you let the sound wash over you, it ceases to feel alien. It feels like memory, like heartbeat, like the first note of a hymn calling us home, reminding us that the abyss is not empty. It is alive with resonance, with passage, with song. Stand now at the precipice of imagination, where physics, philosophy, and myth intertwine, and listen to the theory that chills even hardened scientists with awe. The idea that every black hole is not merely a hungry void but the womb of another universe, that when a massive star collapses, the singularity at its heart does not simply mark an end but ignites a beginning, birthing space-time anew on the other side. And so the multiverse doorway theory emerges, suggesting that our universe itself may have been born from the collapse of a star in a parent cosmos, its black hole swelling into the Big Bang that seeded galaxies, stars, and life. And this possibility reframes every image we hold of death, because if a black hole is a grave in one universe, it is a cradle in another, and that duality mirrors myths of resurrection, of phoenixes rising from ashes, of worlds reborn through fire. But here it is not poetry but physics whispering rebirth. Equations showing that the extreme density of a singularity may explode outward into a new expansion. And when you gaze into a black hole, you may be staring not at annihilation, but at the roots of another universe, one invisible yet infinite, hidden like a child within the womb of its mother. And think of the implications. For it would mean that the multiverse is a vast tree, each black hole a seed that flowers into a new reality, each universe bearing its own stars, laws, and perhaps beings asking the same questions we ask. And if true, the cosmos is not a single stage, but an endless theater of creation, linked together through gateways, disguised as voids. And here the human heart responds, because we too fear endings yet cling to hope that each ending is a transformation. And the multiverse doorway theory tells us that our cosmos is not fragile but fertile, that collapse is not failure but genesis. And the eerie thought follows, if black holes create universes, then the black holes within our own universe may themselves be cradling new realities even now. Countless hidden realms unfolding beyond our perception, making us both children of one black hole and parents of others. And though skeptics argue it is unprovable, though critics call it speculation, the allure remains irresistible, because it answers the riddle of why there is something rather than nothing. It suggests that creation is not singular but infinite, and it whispers that black holes are not only devourers but creators, not only graves but gateways into eternal succession. And as you lean closer to this theory, letting it coil around your imagination, you realize the question is no longer whether black holes end things, but how many beginnings they hold within them, how many doors are opening, silently, in the darkness beyond sight, in the silence of the abyss, where black holes were once thought to be eternal prisons of matter and energy. Stephen Hawking bent the laws of physics into revelation, proposing that even these cosmic giants are not truly permanent, that they leak faintly, invisibly, through what we now call Hawking radiation, a phantom stream of particles appearing at the edge of the event horizon, born from the quantum froth, spacetime itself. Pairs of virtual particles emerging from the vacuum, one falling in, the other escaping, carrying with it a whisper of the black hole's mass. And though almost imperceptible, this process means black holes are not immortal, but slowly evaporating, shrinking, fading, and eventually disappearing. But what makes this radiation more than a scientific curiosity is what it suggests about the very nature of black holes. Because if they emit, then they are not sealed vaults, not final tombs, but porous gateways, bleeding information, leaking memory, whispering secrets into the cosmos. And this transforms the way we see them, not as silent executioners but as doorways cracking open, as passages that cannot fully close, and the phantom particles become the proof, delicate signals that what enters may yet find a way back, encoded in faint radiation. And some physicists argue that this is how information escapes, carried by ghostly emissions into the universe, ensuring that nothing is lost, only translated, and others take it further, suggesting that Hawking radiation is a sign that black holes are not only destroyers, but recyclers, cosmic alchemists, slowly returning what they consume, piece by piece, to the fabric of reality. And in mythic language, this is the serpent spitting out what it swallowed, the devourer revealing that it cannot hold forever, that even the abyss must yield. And perhaps this leakage is the very key to understanding black holes as gateways. Because if matter and energy do not die but are transformed, then the threshold is not final but transitional. Not an ending but a slow rebirth. And when you imagine those phantom particles flickering at the edge of the void, it feels almost human, like breaths escaping from the chest of a dying giant. Sighs that prove life persists even in darkness. And it forces us to ask whether Hawking radiation is not only evidence of decay, but evidence of passage. The proof that what enters a black hole may travel, leak, and emerge again, somewhere else, in some other form. And as you listen to the science, you hear the whisper beneath it, that nothing is absolute, that even black holes cannot keep what they take, that every abyss must release its ghosts. And perhaps those ghosts are not only radiation, but echoes of other universes, slipping through the cracks of eternity. Long before particle physics, long before radio telescopes tuned into the hum of the void, the night sky itself was read as scripture, its constellations treated as sentences, its eclipses as punctuation. And in those vast stellar texts, the prophets of antiquity found warnings and promises. For the Babylonians inscribed omens on clay tablets, predicting the rise and fall of kings by the appearance of darkened suns, while the Chinese imperial astronomers carefully noted comets and black patches of sky, interpreting them as gateways through which heavenly spirits passed. And in medieval Europe, alchemists gazed upward and declared that collapsing stars signaled transformation, not destruction, as if the cosmos itself enacted death and rebirth rituals in fire. And in every corner of the world, seers claimed that stars did not die. They crossed, that their disappearance was not a finale but a passage to unseen dimensions. And these prophecies, preserved in manuscripts, scrolls, and oral traditions all return to one haunting refrain: that the heavens contain thresholds, that the abyss is not annihilation but initiation. And when you read those texts today, they feel less like superstition and more like early interpretations of what modern astrophysics now whispers: that black holes are not graves but gateways. And you cannot help but wonder if those who recorded these prophecies were not simply mythmakers, but careful observers, noting patterns of light and darkness, encoding in spiritual language what science would later reframe in equations. And what is prophecy if not the attempt to name the future in the language of the present? So when the prophets of old spoke of stars reborn, of cosmic trials, of serpents devouring suns only to return them, were they not anticipating what we now debate with chalk and data? The theory that collapse leads to creation, that death is doorway, and in this way the prophecies of the stars bind us to our ancestors. For we too search the sky for meaning. We too interpret its darkness as both threat and promise. And perhaps the wisdom we have lost is the courage to read science and myth as one continuous story. A story in which black holes are not only scientific phenomena, but archetypal gates, fulfilling the ancient vision that nothing in the cosmos truly ends, that every grave contains a secret passage. And so the next time you stand beneath the night sky, remember that you are not only looking at stars, but at prophecies, ancient warnings, that the darkness between those lights holds not silence, but thresholds, and that the abyss, far from being void, may be the oldest scripture of them all. Out there in the cold, silent gulf beyond the planets, two human-made relics drift further from home than anything else we have ever touched. The Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecraft, launched in 1977 with golden records carrying our sounds, our greetings, our music, fragments of humanity pressed into grooves of copper and gold. And as they sail into interstellar space, they carry more than instruments. They carry our longing to cross thresholds, to step beyond the horizon of the known. And one cannot help but imagine what would happen if their paths one day curved toward the ultimate abyss, toward the dark mouth of a black hole, where the hum of space-time swallows even light. And picture it, the fragile machine, covered in dust of centuries, approaching the event horizon, its signal growing faint but never silenced, transmitting until the very last moment, perhaps caught forever in time dilation, its message to Earth frozen at the edge of eternity. And what lies beyond for Voyager is the riddle we ask for ourselves. Because if black holes are gateways and not graves, then that little craft might not simply be destroyed, it might be delivered, crossing through the veil into another realm, carrying with it the voices of Earth, a bottled message from one universe washed onto the shores of another. And think of the poetry of it, that our attempt to explore the stars might unintentionally plant the seed of humanity in a new cosmos, a machine that whispers Bach, whale songs, greetings in 50 languages, drifting not into death, but into rebirth. And in that vision, Voyager becomes more than a spacecraft. It becomes a symbol of our collective desire to know whether black holes end stories or open them. And perhaps this is why the Voyagers inspire such reverence, because they are not only machines, but pilgrims, carrying our memory into the unknown. And if one of them should one day slip past the horizon of a black hole, then maybe we will finally glimpse our answer. Maybe the gateway will open, not for us, but for the little messenger we built with hands and hope. And its journey will remind us that exploration has always been about thresholds, about daring to send ourselves where we may not return, about daring to imagine that the abyss is not only silence but a door. And so the Voyager's last journey, whether centuries or millennia from now, may not be an ending but the first crossing, the human-made key to a gate that has always waited in the dark. Behind the walls of the Vatican, where marble corridors echo with centuries of guarded secrets, lies an archive so vast and silent, it is said to stretch for miles beneath the holy city. And within these hidden vaults, away from sunlight and the reach of common scholars, rest manuscripts long forbidden, texts too dangerous or too strange for public eyes. And among them whispers speak of astronomical notes, written by early church scholars who gazed into the heavens not with telescopes but with awe. charting eclipses, supernovae, and dark patches of sky they dared to call mouths of judgment, places where light was consumed and time itself seemed to falter. And in these writings, the abyss was described as more than cosmic threat, it was portrayed as threshold, a passage through which souls might travel, either into salvation or damnation, and so blackness in the heavens became entwined with theology, not merely an object of study but a symbol of divine power, gates that only God could control, and yet buried deeper in the manuscripts, beyond the warnings, lie curious diagrams, circles folded inside circles, annotations in Latin hinting that what falls into such darkness may emerge, transformed, reborn in a different order of creation. And though the Church silenced many voices, labeling such ideas heresy, the notes remained locked away, preserved in secrecy rather than destroyed, perhaps because some feared they were true. And conspiracy theorists argue even now that the Vatican holds texts from Alexandria, scrolls smuggled before the flames, containing ancient knowledge of cosmic gateways and whether myth or reality. The idea persists that priests once wrestled with the same riddle as modern physics, that what vanishes into the abyss does not die but crosses, that black holes are not graves but divine portals veiled in judgment and mystery. And consider the irony. While science now peers into the heart of Sagittarius A, capturing images of swirling accretion disks, the Vatican's vaults may already contain interpretations of such phenomena written centuries ago in candlelight, suppressed not for lack of truth but for fear of what truth would mean. For if black holes are gateways, then death itself is not final, and the monopoly of salvation is broken, and so the manuscripts remain forbidden, locked under keys held by men in scarlet robes, guarded as if they were not relics but weapons. And perhaps they are, weapons of knowledge that could unseat entire doctrines. For what greater heresy than to say the abyss is not punishment but passage, that the darkness of the heavens is not the wrath of God but the architecture of eternity. And though we may never touch these manuscripts, their whisper leaks through rumor and speculation, reminding us that knowledge once feared is knowledge still waiting, that the abyss has always been more than silence, it has always been a door, and even the Vatican cannot bury it forever. Beneath the fields and villages along the French-Swiss border, in a subterranean ring stretching 17 miles, the Large Hadron Collider hums with power, a cathedral of magnets and detectors, where humanity smashes particles together at energies once reserved for the hearts of stars. And while the official mission is to unlock the building blocks of matter, rumors swirl like shadows around the experiment, whispers that CERN's colossal machine may be capable of opening microgateways, tiny black holes flickering into existence for fractions of a second, windows into dimensions beyond our own. And though physicists reassure the world that these phenomena are harmless, that such microholes would evaporate instantly through Hawking radiation, conspiracy theorists insist the stakes are higher, that in the deepest tunnels of CERN the abyss itself has been glimpsed, and the fear is not unfounded. For in 2008 lawsuits were filed against CERN, claiming its experiments risked tearing the fabric of spacetime, swallowing the Earth, and while the courts dismissed such claims, the myth has never died, fueled by cryptic photos, strange power outages, and the sheer unsettling fact that smashing protons at nearly the speed of light edges us closer to the conditions of creation itself. And when you think of it, what else is a collider but a man-made echo of the cosmic collapse that births black holes, a mirror of the violence that forges thresholds? And if the multiverse doorway theory is true, then perhaps each collision is not just destruction but a knock on the door of another reality, a whisper against the veil. And imagine, even for a heartbeat, that a micro-gateway holds open, not vanishing immediately but pulsing with connection. A tunnel too small for us but vast enough for information, for echoes, for shadows of another cosmos to seep through. And some claim that already anomalies have appeared, data that resists explanation, particles that should not exist, signatures that hint at dimensions hidden beside our own. And whether fact or fantasy, the idea lingers that CERN has stepped into forbidden territory, once reserved for gods and myths, daring to reproduce on Earth what stars do in silence, daring to coax gateways from the fabric of reality, And this vision, whether thrilling or terrifying, makes the collider not just a scientific project but a ritual, a modern altar where humanity plays with thresholds, seeking to unlock the same mystery the ancients carved in spirals and serpents, that what collapses may also create, that the abyss is never sealed. And perhaps one day, deep under the fields of Switzerland, a collision will last long enough to prove it, to show that black holes, whether cosmic or microscopic, are not only graves but gateways waiting to be crossed. Across cultures, the phoenix has always been a symbol of fire, death, and rebirth. A bird that burns to ash only to rise again. Feathers glowing, wings stretching into the dawn. And in modern cosmology, this myth finds an uncanny reflection in what some physicists call the Phoenix universe theory. The idea that our cosmos is not a singular creation, but one in an endless cycle, collapsing into black holes and cosmic crunches, then exploding outward again in big bangs, each universe rising from the ashes of the last. And when you picture a star collapsing into a black hole, its matter crushed into singularity, its devoured by darkness, it is easy to imagine this as death. But if that singularity seeds a new universe, then it is also rebirth, the phoenix unfolding from shadow. And this vision changes everything, for it suggests the cosmos is eternal, not as one continuous line, but as a rhythm, a cycle of fire and silence, collapse and expansion. And humanity stands as witness to a process much older and grander than any scripture, one written into the very physics of black holes. And imagine the awe of realizing that our own universe may be nothing more than the child of another, born when its parent fell into a black hole, and that our black holes now may be carrying the seeds of universes yet unborn, waiting in silence to ignite into their own galaxies, stars, and lives. And if this is true, then every death we see in the sky is not only tragedy but creation, every dark sphere not only a grave but a womb. And in this light the phoenix becomes more than myth, it becomes a mirror, a symbol of the cosmic process itself, a reminder that endings are never final, that fire is not destruction but transformation. And even on Earth, where civilizations fall and rise, the metaphor holds, because we too live in cycles. We too rebuild from ashes. And perhaps that is why the phoenix endures across cultures, why it is carved in temples, written in manuscripts, painted in manuscripts of medieval Europe, and whispered in Chinese poetry, because at some level, humanity has always sensed the rhythm, the burning and the rising, the silence and the song. And now science echoes what myth proclaimed, that the universe itself is a phoenix, born from collapse, rising from its own ashes. And each black hole is not the end of that story but the moment the flames begin, the place where the next dawn waits, unseen but inevitable. At the center of our Milky Way, hidden behind veils of dust and gas, lies a presence so massive that stars orbit it like moths circling an invisible flame, and astronomers have named it Sagittarius A, a supermassive black hole 4 million times the mass of our Sun, a cosmic leviathan whose gravity binds our galaxy together. And in 2019 the Event Horizon Telescope, a planet-wide array of radio dishes, captured its shadow for the first time, a blurred glowing ring of gas and fire, encircling an empty darkness, an image that shook the world because it was proof, visual and undeniable, that the abyss we imagined was real. And as humanity stared into that shadow, we felt the same awe the ancients must have felt when they painted serpents and spirals across stone, the same trembling recognition that the heart of creation is bound to destruction. And yet, as scientists analyzed the light, they realized it was not silence but a story. The gas swirling at near-light speeds whispered of matter crossing a threshold, vanishing into a place we cannot see. And again the question returned, was it annihilation, or was it passage? And standing before the image of Sagittarius A, the first photograph of the heart of our own galaxy, you feel something intimate. Because this abyss is not in another cluster millions of light years away, it is home, it is our black hole, the anchor of our spiral, the great gate that has always watched us, and perhaps will one day claim us. And if the multiverse doorway theory is true, then this shadow is not only our center but our potential passage, the door of 3, rough which our galaxy itself might be reborn. And when you look at it closely, you sense not fear but familiarity, as if the darkness at the heart of the Milky Way mirrors the darkness within ourselves, the unknown we carry, the threshold each of us must cross. And so Sagittarius A becomes more than an astronomical object. It becomes a symbol of destiny, of the gateway that binds us all. And though science calls it singularity and accretion disk, myth calls it serpent, gate, womb, song, and in its shadow, we see not only the hunger of gravity, but the possibility of beginnings, the silent promise that even in the deepest darkness, there may be passage. And perhaps, when our descendants look back on this moment, the first image of the abyss at our heart, they will not see fear, but the first glimpse of the doorway that will one day carry us beyond ourselves. Now that we have traced myths, scrolls, equations, and images of shadows, we stand at the brink of the most haunting riddle of all, the ultimate question. If black holes are gateways, then who or what builds them? Who or what controls them? And are they natural features of the cosmos, inevitable byproducts of collapsing stars? Or are they designed, constructed, placed like doorways in a labyrinth to guide us toward truths we are not yet ready to see? And this question claws at the heart of science and philosophy alike, because if black holes are natural, then the universe is an artist of infinite cycles, folding itself into passageways again and again. But if they are designed, then they are artifacts of intelligence, signs that some greater order or consciousness has stitched corridors between realities. And here lies the chill, because when we ask who controls them, we are really asking whether we are alone in this cosmos, whether ancient gods were metaphors or veiled memories of beings who mastered these gates, whether civilizations older than stars themselves once passed through and left behind black holes as relics of their journeys. And the more we learn, the deeper the question cuts, because black holes do not simply swallow, they shape. Galaxies orbit their mass, light bends in their pull, time itself trembles at their edge, and these qualities feel less like chaos and more like architecture, a structure holding the cosmos in balance. And perhaps that is the answer, that the designer is not outside but the universe itself, consciousness woven into matter, intelligence written into physics. And yet we cannot shake the possibility that beyond the veil lies something watching, something waiting, something that placed these gateways not only to recycle stars but to test those who reach them, to invite or to warn. And so the ultimate question is not merely scientific, it is existential, for it forces us to confront what it would mean if the abyss is not indifferent but intentional, if stepping across its threshold is not only travel but encounter. And here every myth, every prophecy, every scientific paradox begins to converge into a single trembling thought, that black holes might not just be part of the universe, they might be the universe's voice, whispering the invitation to cross, to discover whether we are dust wandering blindly or children being guided toward a destiny greater than galaxies. And so the question lingers unanswered, echoing in the silence of the void, drawing us forward with equal parts fear and wonder, because to know the truth we must one day step through, and the abyss does not tell us what we will find. At last the journey leads us here, to the threshold not of myth or manuscript, not of equations or telescopes, but of ourselves. For the final chapter of the story of black holes as gateways is not written by stars or serpents, but by humanity's own decision, the choice of whether we will dare to step into the abyss when the moment arrives. And this is no distant fantasy, because as technology advances, as probes push farther into interstellar space, and theories of quantum travel grow sharper, we approach the possibility that one day we may send a machine, a message, perhaps even a person toward the event horizon, not as an act of despair, but as the ultimate pilgrimage, the crossing of the greatest threshold the cosmos offers. And here lies the dilemma. For to fall into a black hole may mean obliteration, the end of everything we know. Yet if they are gateways, then to fall is to pass through, to discover new universes, new laws of nature, perhaps even new forms of life. And in that choice, humanity faces a mirror, because every generation has stood before its own horizons, crossing oceans, climbing mountains, piercing the sky with rockets, and each time fear was outweighed by wonder. risked by the promise of knowledge, and so the abyss becomes the next great frontier, the dark ocean that calls us as the Pacific once called sailors, as the moon once called astronauts, and the decision will not be easy, for it will divide us between those who see the black hole as grave and those who see it as door, between those who cling to safety and those who embrace mystery. Yet history, guests, the choice has already been made, for humanity has never ceased stepping forward, never ceased pressing into darkness with the fragile torch of curiosity. And perhaps when that moment comes, when a voyager or a human ship or even an artificial intelligence approaches the horizon, the silence of the cosmos will be broken, the threshold crossed, and for the first time we will know whether the myths were right, whether the scrolls, the chants, the equations, and the prophecies all pointed to a truth hidden in plain sight, that black holes are not the universe's graves but its gateways. And in that moment the choice of humanity will no longer be about survival. It will be about destiny, about whether we accept the invitation the abyss has always whispered, to cross the door and step into the unknown. And so the story closes as it began, not with an ending but with a question, the same one the darkness has whispered to us across centuries. When the gate opens, will we have the courage to walk through? So the next time you look at the night sky, remember this: a black hole may not be a silent grave, but a hidden passage waiting to be crossed. From ancient civilizations to modern physics, the whispers all point to one terrifying, wondrous truth: black holes might be gateways to other universes. The question is not if they exist, but whether we are ready to enter them. Stay curious, keep searching the unknown, and never stop questioning the secrets the cosmos hides in plain sight.